This podcast is supported by Anthropic, the public benefit corporation behind Claude. Everyone's got a hard question about AI. Your job, your kids, where it's going. Anthropic was built to surface those questions and share what it finds along the way, because there's hope in hard questions. Ask yours at claude.ai/Spotify and keep thinking. That's claude.ai/Spotify.
I've been in this library for 6 hours. I'm out of snacks and energy. Plus, I just realized I forgot to put deodorant on.
Oh, girl, you're a mess. Let's run to Target.
Let's RTT.
We'll grab some protein chips, body spray, and deodorant.
And we get 20% off with Target Circle so we can get those great face masks for our self-care Sundays.
I love an SCS.
Let's get out of here.
College students get 20% off their next purchase with Target Circle. Subject to terms. Visit target.com/circle for more details.
This podcast is supported by Anthropic, the public benefit corporation behind Claude. Everyone's got a hard question about AI. Your job, your kids, where it's going. Anthropic was built to surface those questions and share what it finds along the way, because there's hope in hard questions. Ask yours at claude.ai/Spotify and keep thinking. That's claude.ai/Spotify.
I've been in this library for 6 hours. I'm out of snacks and energy. Plus, I just realized I forgot to put deodorant on.
Oh, girl, you're a mess. Let's run to Target.
Let's RTT.
We'll grab some protein chips, body spray, and deodorant.
And we get 20% off with Target Circle so we can get those great face masks for our self-care Sundays.
I love an SCS.
Let's get out of here.
College students get 20% off their next purchase with Target Circle. Subject to terms. Visit target.com/circle for more details.
Hello and welcome to the program UFO Warning. In this episode, we're talking about the Greek Roswell. That's correct, the Greek Roswell. You know, sometimes we get so focused, I think, on sightings and news in our own country that we forget about the rest of the globe. And this really is a global phenomenon, these UFOs. Now, I found this article over at the GreekReporter.com, written by Nick Kampourisa, written by Nick Kampourisa, Kampouris, dated August 17th, 2026. Title says, The Greek Roswell, UFO sightings in Greece nobody talks about. He goes on to say, while international attention tends to focus on the Pentagon's declassified files or sightings over the American Southwest, Greece has quietly accumulated its own extensive catalog of UFO sightings, also known as unidentified aerial phenomena, rivaling anything held in the United States or United Kingdom government archives. UFO sightings in Greece include mass sightings witnessed by entire village communities in the 1950s and hard radar contacts tracked by Hellenic Air Force controllers. The country's documented history of anomalous aerial activity is indeed substantial and largely overlooked by the wider world. Like I said, people just don't think it happens unless it happens within, 100 miles of where they live at. The UFO sightings of Thessaly and Lesbos in the 1950s. One of the most well-documented incidents of UFO sightings in Greece takes us back to the autumn of 1954. A massive wave of sightings swept across the country, particularly over the eastern Aegean island of Lesbos and the region of Thessaly and central mainland Greece. What is worth noting here is that these weren't isolated stories from some lone shepherds out in the hills. Entire villages, places like Vrisa, Anamosia, and Agios, watched the skies light up. The witnesses included local council presidents, police officers, and whole crowds of people backing up each other's stories. A fundamental ingredient in a story like this to be considered at least somewhat credible. So here again we have mass sightings and we have credible witnesses. The local mayor, maybe law enforcement, people that are typically believed are seeing these things. And it says, keep in mind this was 1954. You couldn't blame a weird light on a rogue consumer drone or Starlink satellite. Even as airplanes were a rare sight above Greece at the time, especially in places like Lesbos or Thessaly, people were watching intensely bright objects perform maneuvers that effectively defy the law of physics. Even today, with all our advanced sensors and tracking tech, we would struggle to explain what these villagers saw. And it goes on, talks about the radar incident of 1990. Things took an undeniable turn in 1990, moving from village squares right into the control towers of Greece's airports. 3 separate air traffic controllers watching state-of-the-art radar picked up something entirely unexplainable. It was a cigar-shaped craft ripping through Greek airspace at over 3,000 miles per hour. Now imagine 3,000 miles per hour. Like what, 5 times the speed of sound or something? At first, people thought this was probably a glitch. However, it soon proved to be a physical object pinning a hard target on military radar screens, prompting the Hellenic Air Force to open an official file for the case. Now notice, at first people thought this was probably a glitch. It's always this normalcy bias. When aviation professionals witness something like this, it carries serious weight, as the number one hypothesis is enemy aircraft. These are people trained to instantly recognize weather balloons, civilian planes, and natural atmospheric tricks. It is their job to differentiate among these to avoid unnecessary concerns. At the time, someone floated the idea that it might just be classified American laser testing. That said, a laser doesn't usually trip highly calibrated radar systems designed to track physical mass. This was not the first time airport experts spotted something akin to a UFO. Elite radar operators tracking impossible machines as a frequent phenomenon, proving that whatever these things are, they don't care much about international borders. Goes on, talks about the Roswell UFO incident of Greece. Perhaps the most outrageous event, however, one that researchers often refer to as the Greek Roswell, happened that same year on September 2nd, 1990, over the area of Megaplatanos in central Greece. Witnesses watched a squadron of strange lights moving across the night sky before one of them seemed to suffer a catastrophic failure. People reported seeing it plunge to the earth, causing a massive fire, slicing cleanly through tree trunks and scattering metallic debris everywhere. The weirdest part was that the surviving lights didn't disappear. They reportedly hovered right over the crash site, almost like they were running a rescue or recovery operation, before finally shooting away into the dark. Naturally, the Hellenic Air Force showed up fast. They cordoned off the entire area and quickly put out a statement blaming the mess on a falling Soviet satellite. In practice, though, that explanation didn't set right with the locals, who had just watched other craft stop to pick up the pieces. It almost sounds like a deep state operation from the States where they go in and collect one of these things. I wonder if there were any bodies. It's that exact kind of disconnect, the government's official line versus what people actually saw with their own 2 eyes, that keeps the UFO disclosure movement pushing for answers today. Yeah, absolutely. So I asked AI to dig into this Greek UFO wave of 1954, and I guess it's known as the Great Greek UFO wave of 1954. It tells us the story begins in the autumn of 1954 when reports of strange objects began appearing across Greece. The activity was particularly concentrated around Lesbos in the eastern Aegean and Thessaly in central Greece, but reports eventually appeared in numerous other parts of the country. What makes the Greek wave fascinating is that these weren't simply isolated reports from one person seeing a strange light. In several cases, entire communities reportedly watched the objects, and some of the reports were transmitted to authorities through police channels. At Vrissa on Lesbos, for example, the local community president and residents were among those who reportedly witnessed the object. And of course, this was 1954. There weren't any smartphones or consumer drones. And like we said before, no Starlink satellites. And there was also a lot less air traffic. Now, that doesn't automatically make every observation ET, but it does make the historical context important. I think we should remember that. Now, the first major sighting, it tells us, was in Thessaly. One of the earliest incidents occurred around Agios Georgios on Mount Pelion in Thessaly. According to researcher Megaplatanos Fimbos on October 2nd, 1954, before a 50-year-old farmer named Elias Villegas was returning home from his fields at approximately 7 p.m. when he noticed an enormous luminous object in the sky. Villegas described what appeared to be several extremely bright circles forming an elongated object. He compared it to a large balloon-shaped target used for anti-aircraft practice. The object was reportedly moving horizontally toward the east over Mount Orthrus. His estimate was extraordinary. He believed the object appeared roughly 10 to 12 times the diameter of the moon and was traveling at approximately airplane speed. Now that would have had to have been enormous, I would think. The sighting reportedly lasted only about 10 seconds. Interestingly, another local farmer, Hatzagorgio, I know I'm slaughtering these names here, Hatzagorgio reportedly told Villegas that he had seen something similar. The first case is especially interesting because Fimbos later investigated the story and interviewed the witness. He described Villegas as a relatively simple farmer, but also as an educated and knowledgeable man who knew enough about astronomy to recognize planets. That doesn't prove what he saw, but it makes the testimony more interesting. From there, the UFOs appear to have moved to Lesbos. A few days later, the center of mystery shifted toward Lesbos, October 6, 1954. On October 6, at approximately 3:15 in the afternoon, residents of the village of Rissa reportedly observed a small, star-like object. But this wasn't described as an ordinary stationary light. According to the report transmitted through the local police authorities, the object maneuvered over the village for approximately 15 minutes. It then reportedly accelerated toward the northwest, changed direction toward the north, and disappeared. The fact that the report came through the local authorities is one reason the case has survived in the historical UFO literature. And there was an intriguing detail. Reports from across the Aegean claim that two professors at Istanbul University on the Turkish mainland opposite Lesbos also observed an unusual object around the same period. The Turkish observers reportedly described something resembling a luminous cigar moving rapidly across the sky. If accurate, that would mean the phenomena was potentially visible from both sides of the Aegean. Then October 8th, the flying saucer over Anatolia. Only 2 days later, another dramatic report emerged. At approximately 6 p.m. on October 8th, residents of Anemita, south of Lesbos, reportedly saw a huge luminous object. The object was described as approximately the apparent size of the full moon, but there was something unusual about it. Witnesses reportedly described a tail and intense golden white rays of light. Initially, some people apparently thought they were looking at the moon. Then the object began moving. According to the historical account, it disappeared after about 3 minutes, traveling toward the northeast.
This podcast is supported by Anthropic, the public benefit corporation behind Claude. Everyone's got a hard question about AI. Your job, your kids, where it's going. Anthropic was built to surface those questions and share what it finds along the way, because there's hope in hard questions. Ask yours at claude.ai/Spotify and keep thinking. That's claude.ai/Spotify.
I've been in this library for 6 hours. I'm out of snacks and energy. Plus, I just realized I forgot to put deodorant on.
Oh, girl, you're a mess. Let's run to Target.
Let's RTT.
We'll grab some protein chips, body spray, and deodorant.
And we get 20% off with Target Circle so we can get those great face masks for our self-care Sundays.
I love an SCS.
Let's get out of here.
College students get 20% off their next purchase with Target Circle. Subject to terms. Visit target.com/circle for more details.
Reports suggested that people in other parts of Lesbos, including Petra and Molivos, also observed the phenomena. Now, this is where the 1954 Greek wave starts becoming difficult to dismiss as a single, isolated misidentification, because now we're talking about repeated reports in different communities over consecutive days. October 9th, the object splits in two. The following day produced perhaps one of the strangest reports of the entire wave. On October 9th, a man identified as S. Horatelis and his 12-year-old son were hunting near Stipsi on Lesbos when they reportedly saw a luminous cigar-shaped object moving horizontally. Then something extraordinary happened. The object reportedly changed its movement, began traveling vertically, and then split into two separate cigar-shaped objects. The two objects allegedly continued moving while maintaining a constant distance from each other. The report also claimed that observers on the Turkish side of the Aegean saw the phenomena. For a UFO researcher, this is exactly the sort of testimony that keeps a case like this alive. For the skeptic, they're going to complain about no photographs or instrument readings, or precise angular measurements, or original witness interviews. But the fact is, we have lots and lots of these individual stories that have been related and passed down over the years. And it's kind of like any ancient history. Sometimes all we have left are the stories. Now it goes on and tells us October 13th, hundreds reportedly see the object. Then came one of the biggest incidents of the wave. On October 13th, an unusual luminous object was reportedly observed over Agissos, Lesbos. The location was particularly interesting because people at the local sanatorium reportedly witnessed the object. One description compared it to an object roughly the size of an alarm clock. Witnesses reportedly saw it moving slowly, sometimes traveling in circles and sometimes moving vertically. Then it disappeared. Approximately 10 minutes later, according to the reports, two similar objects appeared. They reportedly traveled in parallel before disappearing toward the north. Other newspaper accounts claim that hundreds of people witnessed the phenomena. One version estimated the objects at an altitude of approximately 2,000 to 3,000 meters, so a little over a mile, I suppose, or roughly 6,500 to 9,800 feet. And there was another strange observation that afternoon. A white vertical contrail-like phenomena was reportedly seen against the clouds, giving witnesses the impression that something was moving through or behind the clouds. Then it tells us the wave spreads across Greece. The reports weren't confined to Lesbos. On October 16th, authorities reportedly received information about a luminous object resembling a frying pan over Maduros on the island of Limnos. October 17th, two women near Doxado in eastern Macedonia reportedly observed a strange red-tailed object. It moved in circles and appeared to change colors. People in the nearby village of Harista reportedly saw the same phenomena. Other reports appeared around Greece, including unusual lights witnessed by police officers and civilians. On November 7th, there was the Volos explosion. One of the most dramatic incidents occurred on November 7th. Earlier that morning, four men traveling by taxi near Patras reportedly saw a luminous object in the sky. The object was described as slightly smaller than the full moon. They initially assumed it might actually be the moon, then they realized the moon had already set. The men reportedly stopped the vehicle to watch the object. Then came a spectacular flash. According to the historical account, the flash illuminated the surrounding area like thousands of flares. The object then allegedly accelerated away at tremendous speed, but the same date produced another extraordinary report. Approximately 10:30 p.m., two men in Volos, Thessaly reportedly saw a luminous object above the Pagasikos Gulf. The object was described as slightly smaller than the moon and emitting a silvery light. Then, according to the witnesses, it appeared to circle the moon at an extremely high speed. Eventually, it reportedly accelerated toward the east, and then it appeared to explode. Witnesses reportedly heard a hollow noise and saw a dense white cloud surrounded by brilliant light. The description is dramatic enough to sound like something from a science fiction movie. That is wild. November 9th, three objects emerged. 2 days later, another unusual report surfaced. On November 9th, a luminous flying saucer was reportedly observed over Komitini in Thrace. The object allegedly disappeared after releasing or ejecting three smaller luminous objects described as cigar-shaped. By this point, the phenomena had developed a recognizable pattern. Witnesses were repeatedly describing extremely bright objects, cigar-shaped objects, round or disc-like objects, objects with tails, rapid changes in direction, circular movements, objects apparently splitting into multiple objects, objects appearing and disappearing, brilliant flashes, objects apparently moving at extraordinary speeds. And of course, combination is one of the reasons that the 1954 Greek wave remains so intriguing. Yeah, that is really wild. It seems like these things just went on for about, I don't know, like a 2-month period or a month and a half period, and then they were gone. But just 1954, like we said, you're not going to really be able to write that all off as drones or satellites or whatnot. Now, I want to finish up here. That went a little bit longer than what I planned to. I want to finish up talking about this Greek Roswell incident. Now, this case known as the Greek Roswell, this is really something. It's also called the Megaplatanos incident of September 2nd, 1990. I guess it's a pretty famous report, but something I really don't know much about, or didn't know much about until I started researching this. Now, we're told the setting is Megaplatanos, Greece, and that Megaplatanos is a small rural village in the Phytodia region of central Greece near the town of Atalante. In 1990, it was largely an agricultural and shepherding community. The surrounding landscape is mountainous and relatively isolated, making it an interesting setting for an alleged nighttime crash. Now, if you look at the pictures of this place, it is beautiful. Like, you have these rolling hills, and then the backdrop, you have these striking mountain range behind it. Really neat. On the night of September 2nd, 1990, residents reportedly noticed something unusual in the sky. According to the principal accounts, this wasn't simply one mysterious light. It was a formation of approximately 5 or 6 luminous objects, and what happened next is what transformed the sighting into the Greek equivalent of Roswell. A formation of strange objects. The incident reportedly began sometime around 9 p.m., although some later accounts give a considerably later time, including approximately 3 a.m. This discrepancy is important because the historical accounts aren't completely consistent about the timeline. Of course, you're talking about eyewitness accounts, and people sometimes see things differently. We know this. The objects were reportedly seen approaching from the north. Witnesses described several bright objects moving together across the night sky. Some accounts claim that even more objects were visible in the wider area, with reports describing more than a dozen lights moving across central Greece. The objects allegedly traveled northward, passing in the vicinity of Mount Pentecoeus and Thessalonica before changing direction and moving south toward the Peloponnese. Then they reportedly turned again and headed back toward central Greece. This unusual flight pattern is one of the features emphasized by later UFO researchers. At some point during the reported journey, one of the objects allegedly began behaving differently from the others. Witnesses saw it changing colors and flying erratically. Instead of maintaining formation, it appeared to lose stability. Then it began losing altitude. According to the account attributed to witness Trantos Keratranos, the object descended rapidly toward the hills near Megaplatanos. Keratranos reportedly watched from approximately 500 yards away, and then came the moment that gave the case its Greek Roswell reputation. The object apparently crashed into the hillside. The alleged crash occurred on or near a small hill known as Temprosotis, close to the Church of Prophet Elias. Witnesses reportedly saw the object descend into the wooded area. There was a fire. Trees were reportedly damaged or cut. And one particularly strange aspect of the account was the alleged lack of conventional crash sound. According to Keratranos, the object appeared to descend and strike the hillside, but witnesses reportedly did not hear the sort of tremendous explosion or impact one would expect from an aircraft crash. The surrounding vegetation nevertheless reportedly caught fire. Later accounts described an oval-shaped burned area at the site. A pine tree in the center of the area was reportedly damaged or cleanly severed. If this were simply a story about an unidentified object crashing into a Greek hillside, it would already be interesting, but according to the witnesses, the other objects didn't leave. Instead, they reportedly moved toward the crash site. Some hovered over the area. 2 were reportedly seen descending toward the ground. And then witnesses described what appeared to be lights traveling between the ground and the hovering objects. To the people watching from the village, the activity looked like some kind of organized recovery operation. The one object had apparently crashed. The others appeared to have come back for it.
This podcast is supported by Anthropic, the public benefit corporation behind Claude. Everyone's got a hard question about AI. Your job, your kids, where it's going. Anthropic was built to surface those questions and share what it finds along the way, because there's hope in hard questions. Ask yours at claude.ai/Spotify and keep thinking. That's claude.ai/Spotify.
I've been in this library for 6 hours. I'm out of snacks and energy. Plus, I just realized I forgot to put deodorant on.
Oh, girl, you're a mess. Let's run to Target.
Let's RTT.
We'll grab some protein chips, body spray, and deodorant.
And we get 20% off with Target Circle so we can get those great face masks for our self-care Sundays.
I love an SCS.
Let's get out of here.
College students get 20% off their next purchase with Target Circle. Subject to terms. Visit target.com/circle for more details.
That is the detail that has made the case so famous among UFO researchers. According to the witness accounts, the activity continued for hours. Lights were reportedly seen moving up and down around the crash site. Some researchers have interpreted this as evidence that the other objects were retrieving material from the damaged craft. The activity continued throughout the night. The witnesses reportedly remained at a distance because they were afraid to approach the crash site. Eventually, as dawn approached, the mysterious objects departed. By sunrise, they were gone. What remained, according to later investigations, was an unusual area of burned vegetation. Once daylight arrived, the next morning, villagers reportedly felt safe enough to approach the area. And this is where the story starts to get really strange. Physical evidence. According to accounts later collected by UFO investigator George N. Pentolis, people found an unusual burned area. Descriptions include an oval-shaped mark on the ground and damaged pine trees. There are also reports of small metallic fragments and pieces resembling wires. One account says that a small object or fragment was found near the impact area. Another later retelling describes an unusual spherical piece with what appears to be antenna-like projections and a lightning bolt symbol. The particular claim needs to be treated cautiously because it appears primarily in later secondary accounts rather than well-established official investigations. Well, I think what you have here is probably the old parallel narrative going on. You have what the people saw, and then you have your official investigations where they can come in and kind of smooth out some of the bumps, maybe. I don't know. It goes on, talks about the burned tree. One of the stranger claims concerns one of the pine trees. According to later testimony, part of the tree had been burned. A witness reportedly touched the damaged portion and experienced a burning sensation. Yeah, would not recommend doing that. The story has subsequently been interpreted by some UFO researchers as evidence that the crash involved an unusual energy source. But again, this is witness testimony, not laboratory evidence, and there's no publicly available scientific study demonstrating that the tree had been subjected to extraterrestrial technology. Now go and talk about the Hellenic Air Force arrives. So you have these UFO sighted. We have a UFO that people are saying it appears to be disabled, crashes into the hillside. Multiple villagers are watching this whole thing happen. They see the craft go down, a giant fireball. This tree gets either burned up or cut off, almost like it's struck by lightning or something, I guess. And then you have the other UFOs, aircraft, whatever they are, show up on scene. They're there for, I guess, a few hours. It looks as though they're recovering this downed craft. Now, whether it's ET doing this or whether this is some of our guys, who knows. Next morning, the villagers go up to check it out. And of course, it's not long after the villagers arrive that the authorities show up, and they're talking about the Hellenic Air Force arrives. So the Air Force gets here, of course. Perhaps the most important part of the story is what allegedly happened next. According to accounts repeated by UFO researchers, Greek authorities became aware of the incident, and the Hellenic Air Force became involved. Of course, that's the Greek Air Force. The area was reportedly restricted and evidence was collected. Yes, got to get that area cordoned off right away. This is one of the reasons comparisons to Roswell became inevitable. The basic narrative became something crashes, Witnesses see strange objects around the crash site. Physical material is allegedly discovered. Military personnel arrive. The site is investigated or secured. An ordinary explanation is subsequently offered. And there you have it, a classic UFO crash narrative. Nothing happened, nothing to see here, move along sheep. But the Greek case is a little less documented than Roswell. Of course, documented by, I suppose, Americans. And the official explanation says, here's where the story gets particularly interesting. One explanation discussed was that the phenomena could have been associated with a satellite re-entry or falling space debris. Well, it definitely fell from space. Another explanation involved meteors. The September date is significant because the Earth was in the period of the Perseid meteor shower. Of course, if you know anything about meteors, you know that when they crash, they make an awful lot of noise, and they frequently leave large holes in the ground. The Perseus can produce bright meteors, sometimes spectacular fireballs. However, there's an obvious problem with using meteors to explain the entire story. The meteor can certainly create a brilliant streak or fireball, but a meteor doesn't easily explain a reported formation of multiple objects maneuvering together, returning to a crash location, hovering over it for hours, and allegedly conducting a recovery operation. And that's assuming, of course, the witnesses' descriptions are accurate. There are skeptical explanations, which I'm not even going to go into because to me they're just kind of silly. But I just find these cases in Greece so fascinating because it just goes to show that what's happening in the States, here in the U.S., it's not just happening here. It's happening all over the place. We kind of finish up. We're told the investigation by George Pantelis. One of the people associated with investigating the case was Greek UFO researcher George N. Pantelis. That's Pantoulas. I know I'm getting a lot of these names wrong. He reportedly interviewed witnesses, including people who claimed to have observed the objects and the aftermath. The case, therefore, wasn't simply a story that appeared decades later on the internet. There was an effort to document what local residents said they experienced. However, much of the information available today comes from later researchers recounting witness testimonies rather than publicly accessible contemporaneous military investigations containing photographs, radar records, engineering analysis, and a documented chain of custody for the alleged debris. The problem with that assumption is that these guys go on, they investigate this stuff, and then it gets buried somewhere in a file, and we have no access to it. All we have is eyewitness testimony, a lot of times. Then we're left with what happened to the debris. Now, this is one of the most intriguing claims surrounding Megaplatanos. According to later accounts, material recovered from the area was sent for examination. Some sources claim a fragment was sent to a Space Research Institute in Brussels for analysis. Here's where the case becomes frustrating. There does not appear to be a publicly available, authoritative scientific report demonstrating that the material was extraterrestrial or even conclusively identifying it as material from an unknown craft. In other words, the alleged debris is part of the story, but it has not produced publicly verifiable proof of an alien spacecraft. And that's a lot different from saying that there wasn't any debris. And the stronger conclusion is that the public evidence trail is incomplete. This is just standard operating procedure for crashed UFOs and how we deal with them on planet Earth. It says, why call it the Greek Roswell? The comparison to Roswell comes from the structure of the story. The American Roswell incident occurred in 1947. A mysterious object was reportedly recovered in New Mexico. Military authorities initially issued a dramatic announcement and then quickly changed their explanation to a conventional one. Now, of course, we know all about the weather balloon that was supposedly used, and we know that they have since, all these years later, found the actual log for when those balloons were launched, and we know that that rules out that Roswell could have been a balloon, but they keep pushing that lie anyway because I guess that's the whole point. Get as many miles out of a false narrative as you can. Decades later, UFO research interpreted the event as evidence of an extraterrestrial crash and military recovery. Well, not just decades later. People on the ground did too, but they were told to keep their mouths shut if they didn't want to end up buried out in the desert. Remember those. Remember those eyewitness testimonies. Megaplatanos has a remarkably similar narrative structure. An unidentified object allegedly crashes. Witnesses report unusual activity around the crash site. Physical material is recovered. Allegedly, authorities become involved. A conventional explanation is offered, and UFO researchers argue that the conventional explanation doesn't adequately account for the witness testimony. I could also say a crash is observed, a crash is witnessed. People see the crash. Sometimes they see the bodies. Frequently they see the material, the metamaterial that we talk about now. The authorities are called in. Sometimes the metamaterial disappears or it's just poo-pooed away. And then an official explanation is given, a narrative is created, and if necessary, the witnesses are simply, well, for a better term, dehumanized to the point where they're considered not believable anymore. Anyway, we're told that's why the Greek Roswell became attached to this case, but there is a major difference. There is an important difference between the two cases. The Roswell incident has generated enormous amounts of documentation, military records, interviews, and competing investigations, and Megaplatanos has nothing remotely comparable in terms of publicly available documentation. The case is primarily built around witness testimony, later UFO investigations, photographs reportedly taken at the site, claims concerning physical fragments, accounts of Greek military involvement, and later retellings by UFO researchers. And that makes the case fascinating but not proven. Well, the fact is they've learned a lot since Roswell. And they've learned that sometimes, I think they've learned that, number one, never tell the truth. Don't ever, ever, ever come out again and say, oh, by the way, we have a crashed UFO. Because telling the truth is just not going to work. I think what they've learned is it's hard to create a false narrative to disprove one of these things. So a lot of times it's better just to not say anything, send out your crews, grab any material that's left over, clean the crime scene, as it were, the crash scene, and then just ignore it. And then when people talk about it, call them conspiracy theorist. That seems to be the go-to plan now when it comes to dealing with any of these, I don't know if we should call them minor, but compared to, say, like a giant aircraft carrier size craft coming down. These run-of-the-mill UFO crash. Send out the cleanup crew, quarantine the area, and then pretend like it didn't happen. And if people talk about it, just say, well, it must have been a meteorite. A recent UAP case analysis specifically describes the Megaplatanos case as much less strongly supported than another 1990 Greek case involving Hellenic Air Force radar and professional controllers. And that assessment is worth mentioning because it illustrates how the evidentiary quality difference between famous UFO stories and cases with stronger institutional records. Yeah, I think that AI is missing the point. In the 1990 case, we have a UFO that was spotted on radar. In this case, we have a UFO that was spotted on the ground, basically crashed and burned and was taken out of there, whether it was by our own craft or theirs. But that's the difference. You have eyewitness testimony compared to machine witness testimony. That's the difference that I see. Overall, I think this is a fascinating case. You have Roswell in 1947. Then you have all these separate UFO incidents in 1954, this UFO wave, only 7 years after Roswell, that happens. Greece, all over the place. And then fast forward another, 33 years, and you have this, what they call the Greek Roswell, what the villagers are describing as a formation of UFOs go over, one crashes, you have a terrible fire. It looks like there's an overnight salvage operation or rescue operation that happens. They go up the next morning, the craft's gone, there's reportedly some material lying around. Of course, the Air Force gets called in, everything's cleaned up, everything goes away, go back home, forget about it, and don't talk about it anymore. So you can see the evolution. To me, I see with Roswell and this Greek Roswell, you have crashed UFOs in both situations. But the difference is the deep state, whether it's in the U.S. or whether it's in Greece, has become a lot more sophisticated in how they deal with it. A lot more sophisticated in their cleanup efforts, a lot more sophisticated in their PR control and creating a parallel narrative, or if they find that it's easier, just ignoring it. That's what I find fascinating about these cases. Overall, hope you enjoyed the program today. If you did, don't forget to hit like, follow, subscribe. Doesn't cost a dime. Until next time, this is UFO Warning. Over and out.